The screams of the two little girls pierced the silence of the Havenport mansion, her tiny feet cut by broken glass, her face pressed against the curtains as punishment, her twin sister trembling beside her. The stepmother's voice was as sharp as a knife. "You will never be good enough." And no one stopped her until the front door opened. A soldier entered, his boots heavy with war dust. Beside him, a German shepherd, his eyes blazing with loyalty. At that moment, a scream and a snarl tore through the devastation, and the battle for the girls' lives truly began. The wind off the Atlantic moved like a living thing through Havenport, whistling beneath the clapboard eaves and tapping at the thick curtains of the old house on Bayview Road. The floors were salt-worn oak that sighed when footsteps crossed them, and the windows, though polished, kept the ocean in their glass-slim gray lines of tide and sky stitched together. In this winter light, Ellie and Emma Carter, 7-year-old twins in dresses the color of faded roses, stood on tiptoe at the sink, one rinsing and one drying, a choreography they had invented to keep the plates from slipping. Ellie, the bolder one chin up, fair hair and a stubborn cowlick that refused bows, whispered a joke about the gulls outside practicing choir, and Emma smiled without sound, pressing her cheek to the stuffed bear tucked at her elbow. The bear was called Milo and looked as if he had already comforted generations. One ear was stitched with blue thread, Mabel next door's doing. The glass, slick with soap and child-sized anxiety, turned in Ellie's hands, tapped the basin edge, and went to pieces with a bright, betraying chime. A shard lifted like a thin tooth and kissed her knee. Red welled up quick and neat. Emma's smile fell. Before Ellie could say, "I've got it," heels struck the hallway like a metronome set too fast. Marjorie Vance arrived framed by doorway molding, as if the house were introducing its sharpest object. 35, dark hair perfectly waved, a red knit dress that drank the lamplight. She wore success like a perfume and resentment like a second skin. Her smile, silken and social when neighbors visited, had already vanished. What remained was a narrowness in the eyes that turned children into inconveniences and stains into sins. "Against the curtain," she said, voice smooth and thin as wire, and pointed to the living room where the Bayview drapes hung quiet as held breath. Ellie, fiery and loyal, tried to step in front of Emma, but Emma tugged at her sister's hand, both of them shuffling toward the fabric that had become, in small hearts, a wall for punishment. "It was my fault," Ellie said, lifting her chin as if to make herself a shield. "We do not speak back," Marjorie replied. She did not see the blood. She saw only her reflection in the glass cabinet, perfect, composed, a woman who had married into a life she believed she deserved, minus the messy attachments of two small girls still learning the weather of grief. She had once been all smiles in public, patting heads and pouring cocoa. Somewhere between appearances and mornings, another self took the reins. Silas Reed returned to his house with the quiet of a man who has learned to move without wasting force. 38, shoulders squared by 1,000 drills and one unhealed winter in a foreign valley, he carried the particular stillness of soldiers who learned that noise was sometimes just a door for danger to walk through. On his left strode Ranger, black and tan German shepherd, the kind of dog whose eyes tell you he is counting doors and listening to metal breathe. Ranger had worked beside humans in places where alarms were human voices and safety was nothing you could buy. His left ear bore a nick from a night when the sky itself sounded wrong. Silas had taken him home after the last deployment, two souls who mistrusted sleep and understood signals better than speeches. The door to Bayview opened on a hush and a single cry. He was not supposed to be here until morning. The base drill had ended early, and habit brought him home without warning. He saw the curtain in first dull velvet, pulled into the shape of small breathing, and then Ellie's knee, a bright bead on pale skin. Emma's fingers white around Milo's arm, Marjorie's hand angled toward the children like judgment. Something in him, in the rib where he carried a fragment of shrapnel, in the small of his back where he carried a memory he never told, went to heat. "Enough," he said, and his voice filled the room the way the ocean fills a harbor, steady, incontrovertible. The single word landed and Marjorie's mouth pinched, but her gaze slid at once to the uniform coat in his hand, and then, irritably, to Ranger, whose stance had adjusted chest out, weight low, tail still. Silas crossed the floor, lifted the curtain with care, and gathered Ellie close with one arm while his other hand beckoned Emma. Up close, he smelled the glass, the blood, the citrus cleaner that never quite erased the salt in this house. "Let me see," he said, lowering to one knee so his gaze met Ellie's at horizon level, because children in pain deserve a horizon. He pressed a dish towel to the cut. "Ranger," he said without looking. Two fingers swept from thigh to floor. "Stay, guard, give space." Ranger moved a half step back, not out of the line but at the edge of it, a living wedge between Marjorie and the twins, breath slow, ears pivoting toward the kitchen where a draft crept in. "This is not how we live," Silas said, eyes on the crimson soaking the towel. "They broke glass," Marjorie answered. "They break things and then they cry, and you arrive and turn their tears into law." Her smile flicked on and off like a faulty porch bulb. "You being away so much doesn't help." Someone must discipline. Silas lifted his head. The restraint in him, a hard-won thing, shaken back into its scabbard after years of use, smooth his tone, but not its core. Discipline is not humiliation, and you don't step over blood. He saw then, not only the cut and the trembling, but a constellation of tiny bruises at different blues. The way Emma flinched at sudden sound, the way Ellie squared her jaw to swallow heat. How many months had he missed the weather shifting inside these rooms while he timed everything to orders and flights? He looked to Ranger, who flicked his glance to the floorboards near the back hall. The dog's nose vibrated, a low hum at the edge of a growl. Silas filed it. The old latch. The hall's cold seam. Someone had been tampering, or the house was telling him a new story. He rose and carried Ellie to the couch, set Emma beside her, and spoke with the sweetness soldiers reserved for brothers and daughters. "Hold this here." "Good, I'm calling Aaron." He dialed with his thumb. Dr. Aaron Whitaker was the kind of family physician found in coastal towns. Silver at the temples, a softness in the eyes that came from delivering babies and delivering bad news with hands that never shook. He had rowed crew in college, lost his wife to a storm year ago November, and now spent Sundays repairing people's boats because working wood back into shape comforted him. "On my way," Aaron said after hearing Silas say cut, blood, frightened. "And Silas," he added, the old friend under the formal voice, "breathe." Marjorie moved again, her heels a set of small verdicts. "You will not make a scene in front of the neighbors," she said. "You will not take their side against me when you haven't been here to take any side at all." She didn't scream. Her calm was the cold kind. She folded her arms, the red knit tightening at the elbows. In another life, she might have learned to be kind, but the ladder she had climbed had taught her that looking down hurt less than looking in. Ranger's attention sharpened when she shifted. The dog's chest swelled once, and he let out a tone so low it was almost a thought. Silas lifted a hand-open palm. Downward sweep. "Easy." Ranger obeyed, but his eyes never left Marjorie's hands. "The only side here is these girls' safety," Silas said. "If you cannot be that, you cannot be here." He was surprised by his own clarity. Perhaps the house had needed him to say it aloud to become true. Emma's fingers found his sleeve. He touched her knuckles with the back of his index finger. A small contact, a promise neither of them boasted about. Aaron arrived smelling of winter air and eucalyptus, a leather satchel across his chest. He came in as those who know grief enter, soft-footed, without commentary. He knelt at Ellie's knee with a flashlight he warmed briefly in his hands before clicking it on, as if even a beam of light should be kind. "Just a shallow slice," he said, dabbing and humming something like a sea shanty under his breath. "Butterfly closure, sterile strip, and a story afterward if you want one." He looked up at Silas, an old understanding passing between men who had both seen the worst nights give way to morning. "She will need rest and steadiness." They both will. Bruises that live under skin fade. Others need routine, and a door that's always open. He did not look at Marjorie when he said door. "I'll follow with a referral for a child therapist." Breathing games. Predictable light. While Aaron worked, Silas touched Ranger's collar and felt the small vibration there. He had rigged a coin-thin sensor to the dog's tag to buzz when metal met metal at a certain pitch. The faint tremor told him the back latch had been touched recently or the wind was plying loose hardware. Ranger's head turned toward the hallway again, ears cut from shadow. Silas filed it deeper. "Thank you, Doc," he said, and Aaron made for the kitchen to wash his hands, taking with him the copper smell that had haunted the room. Marjorie, who did not like being outnumbered or outquieted, tilting her head in disdain, let the words uncoil with theatrical slowness. "You think this will make me small," she said, "but I am not finished with any of you." She leaned toward the girls as if to ensure the threat landed where she wanted it. "You will all pay for this." Silas did not rise to it. He had learned that answering some fires only feeds them. He adjusted Ellie's bandage and looked at Emma's face, memorizing the line where fear met faith. Outside the windows, the bay drew a long silver breath. A gull called, and the house answered with a single elegant crack from a settling beam. Ranger's ears pricked sharply toward the back door. The sound was minute, a whisper of metal on metal, but it was enough for a dog who could hear trouble rehearse. He turned his head, inhaled, and pressed one paw forward, staking his claim in front of the twins as if the floor itself were a boundary he could write. Silas's gaze flickered to the shadowed hall. Somewhere behind the laundry room, a latch had considered opening. He rested a hand on Ranger's shoulder, and the dog anchored beneath it like a promise. "We're here," he said to the children, to the house, perhaps to the man he used to be. "We're here now." And the room, warmed by low sun and a good dog's steady breath, held. Marjorie's heels clicked once toward the back corridor before she thought better of leaving through a door that wasn't hers to touch. She smiled a thin smile that never reached the eyes and said, almost sweetly, "You won't see me coming." Ranger's head swung, every sense lit. Somewhere a small bolt whispered shut. The curtain stirred, but the window did not open. Morning in Havenport did not bring warmth. The ocean still whispered against the rocks with a voice that remembered storms. Silas had not slept, though Ranger had pressed his weight against the soldier's boots through the night, anchoring him to the present. At dawn, Silas brewed black coffee, wrote the necessary words in heavy ink, and carried them to the town courthouse. A petition for divorce and a request for full custody of Ellie and Emma. He wore his service jacket, not for pride, but because authority still clung to it like a shield. And his signature at the bottom of the page was as steady as it had been on deployment orders. He left the building with a heaviness that was not regret, only the sense of walking across a bridge that would collapse behind him. Back at Bayview Road, Ranger waited on the porch steps, ears pricked, eyes restless. Ellie and Emma sat at the window above, their pale faces framed in glass. Ellie tried to wave, bold in her smallness, while Emma pressed Milo's stitched ear to the pane, as if the bear could spy on Silas's soul. When Silas entered, the house smelled of cinnamon and butter. Mabel Carter stood in the kitchen, pulling a tray of waffles from a worn tin box. At 62, she carried herself with the sturdiness of someone who had once raised 3 sons alone, then lost her husband to a fishing accident that swallowed him quicker than the tide. Her gray hair was pulled back in a knot, her apron dusted with flour, and her hands bore the cracks of work rather than the softness of retirement. Mabel's eyes softened when she saw the girls. They softened further when she noticed the clean bandage on Ellie's knee. "I've seen too much," Mabel confessed, setting the waffles on the table. Her voice held both shame and resolve. "That woman made them kneel on the porch one night in January wind. I wanted to speak, but fear, well, fear makes cowards of neighbors. I'll not be a coward again. I'll testify. And I know the Parkers across the street and the Diaz family by the docks. They've seen enough to add their voices too." Silas nodded, gratitude heavy in his throat. Ranger brushed against Mabel's leg, a silent judge, then relaxed his stance, granting her a place within their circle. Mabel knelt to scratch the shepherd behind the ear. "Good dog," she murmured. "Protect them." "Lord knows someone must." By mid-afternoon, a knock sounded at the door. Detective Ana Morales introduced herself with a badge held steady in her hand. She was 39, Puerto Rican by heritage, her black hair tied neatly back, her suit plain gray but fitted to move easily. Her gaze was sharp, the kind that cataloged bruises without needing photographs. Years earlier, she had worked a case that ended with a child lost forever. Since then, her work had been more than a job. It was an oath she renewed every morning. She carried that oath in the careful way she knelt to greet Ellie and Emma, lowering herself until her eyes were level with theirs. "I need to ask a few questions," Anna said, her voice tempered steel. She invited Ellie to sit on the sofa, asked gently about the bandaged knee. The child shifted, pulled the hem of her pink dress lower, and whispered that she had fallen. Anna glanced at Silas, then back at Ellie, and said softly, "Sometimes we say we fell because we don't want anyone else in trouble. But bruises tell stories, and I am very good at listening to them." She jotted notes, her handwriting sharp and disciplined. When Emma clutched Milo tighter, Anna leaned forward. "That bear, he looks like he keeps secrets safe." "I promise I do the same." While Anna worked, Ranger circled the perimeter. He paused by the back window, nose pressed hard against the frame. He moved to the side yard, positioning himself in the path of the garden camera, staring at a blind corner as if he meant to remind humans of what they had missed. Anna noticed, tilting her head. "Your dog has a nose for angles," she remarked. "Mark those spots. We'll need to install coverage there." Silas gave the hand signal for good work, and Ranger dipped his head once, satisfied. Later, when the girls were upstairs with Mabel sharing cookies, Anna asked Silas to step outside. The salt air cut sharp across his cheekbones. "You've seen combat," she said without preamble. "It stays with you." He hesitated, then nodded. "The nights don't always go quiet. Ranger keeps me steady. His breathing. Sometimes it's the only reason I remember I'm home." Anna studied him, saw the muscle twitch in his jaw. "That steadiness will help your daughters too. But we need evidence to make it permanent. Neighbors' testimonies, photos, anything. I'll file my report tonight." As evening dimmed, the house finally settled. Silas tucked Ellie and Emma into their shared room, Ranger lying long across the doorway like a drawn sword. He thought the day had given them a measure of peace. But when he entered the small study to switch off the lamp, his boot caught a thin fold of paper pushed under the window frame. The glass rattled faintly as if disturbed. Silas bent and unfolded the note. In thick block letters it read, "Don't lose the girl, or you will regret it." The girl was singular, but he knew it meant them both. Ranger appeared at his side, fur bristling, a low growl deep as earth rising from his chest. His nose pointed to the narrow crack in the frame where the paper had been slid. Silas closed his hand around the note until it crumpled. Outside, the wind shifted, and somewhere along the fence, a loose latch trembled. The night after the anonymous note, Havenport seemed to hold its breath. The harbor was restless, waves lashing against the pier, gulls wheeling madly as if they sensed something plotting on land. Inside the old Reed house, light was deliberately placed like pieces on a chessboard, every lamp chosen for its shadow, and every shadow set to reveal what might move in the dark. Detective Ana Morales returned just before dusk with a laptop and a rolled blueprint. She cleared the dining table and spread the papers flat. "We are not waiting for them to strike when they choose," she said. "We control the hour. We control the light." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had learned the cost of hesitation. She moved with precision, hair pulled tight, her eyes lined with the fatigue of someone who had not taken a free Sunday in months. She outlined the plan. At exactly 10:30, the backyard lights would flare on, flooding the lawn so bright the gulls themselves would blink. At 11:00 sharp, they would cut out, simulating a weak point in the system. That false darkness would invite anyone watching to act. Meanwhile, Ellie and Emma would be moved downstairs into Silas's study, where a sturdy oak desk and heavy chair could serve as cover. A silent alarm would be fitted to the classroom window upstairs, the same frame where the threatening letter had been slid through. If touched, the alarm would call the patrol car circling the neighborhood without alerting intruders inside. "This is our snare," Anna concluded, "but you must play your part naturally." Officer Ben Yu joined her that evening, a lean 30-year-old with short-cropped hair and a quiet manner that hid a quick wit. He had once studied engineering before joining the force, and he carried his technical tools in a weathered canvas bag that looked more suited for fishing. He spoke little but moved swiftly, setting small black devices along the window seams and threading wires through planters on the porch. Ranger shadowed him, sniffing each tool with suspicion until Ben crouched and let the dog examine his palm. "Smart eyes," Ben murmured, and Ranger accepted him, tail flicking once before he resumed his post at the back hallway. While the officers worked, Silas knelt in the study with Ellie and Emma. The twins still wore dresses of pale pink, though frayed at the hems. But tonight Silas had wrapped them in his army field blankets, thick olive cloth that smelled faintly of wool and campfire. "Listen to me," he said, his tone patient but firm. "If I say lights on, you sit down and count your breaths with me. 1 through 10. No rushing, no skipping. That is how we stay steady." Ellie raised her chin, always eager to show courage, and repeated the words out loud. Emma whispered them softer, clinging to Milo the bear, her voice nearly lost in the hum of the heater. Silas touched her shoulder gently. "Together, Emma. Ranger will count with us too." The dog lifted his head as if understanding, and the girl gave a faint smile. Later, Anna insisted Silas rehearse the sequence. Lights on, hallway routine, cover position. Each drill steadied the children and perhaps steadied Silas himself. Ranger was fitted with a small collar bell rigged to a vibration sensor, a device Ben explained would tremble against Silas's wristband if metal struck near the windows. "It won't bark unless you command," Ben said, "but you'll know first." Silas nodded. The war had taught him to trust silent signals, not noise. Meanwhile, across town, in a rented flat above a closed pawn shop, the conspirators whispered. Damon Pike, 40 years old, his face weathered and jaw shadowed with stubble, sat polishing his lockpicks with the ritual of a gambler cleaning cards. Once a dockhand, Damon had lost his family fortune to dice games in back rooms. Now he worked muscle jobs for whoever promised cash enough to buy him another chance at winning. Serena Lowe, 35, leaned against the peeling wallpaper, legs crossed, scrolling through burner phones with a manicured finger. She had once been a financial advisor until charges chased her out of Boston. Now she thrived in fraud, knowing the taste of power when money bent to her lies. Between them sat Marjorie Vance, the spurned stepmother, her red lips tight with venom. She spun a wedding ring on the table, glaring at its shine as if it mocked her. "He thinks he can erase me with one signature," she hissed. "But he's locked away plenty in that safe of his, and he'd pay anything for those girls." Damon chuckled low. "Then we make him pay. Tonight we test the dark back at Bayview." The clock edged toward the appointed hour. The house breathed with anticipation. Ranger paced the back door once, then lay down near the girls with his head resting across Emma's ankles, a silent anchor. Anna sat at the laptop, eyes on the feed from hidden cameras. Ben checked the alarm panel one last time. Silas moved through the house with the slow stride of someone preparing for battle, not against an army, but against shadows that wanted to steal what light remained. At 10:30, the backyard lights surged on, casting the lawn into brilliance, every blade of grass sharp against the night. Ellie gasped. Emma clutched Milo tighter. Ranger's ears twitched, but he stayed calm. 30 minutes later, at exactly 11 o'clock, the lights cut to black, swallowing the yard in darkness. A gust swept off the ocean, rushing through the pines with a howl. On Anna's laptop screen, a shadow darted past the left fence line, fast, low, human. At that same instant, the tiny sensor at Ranger's collar trembled, sending a pulse against Silas's wrist. Ranger lifted his head, ears rigid, a growl coiling deep in his chest. Silas felt the vibration, looked to the window, and knew the bait had been taken. The old clock in the hall struck once, the hands poised at the minute before 11. The house lay still, the twins curled beneath Silas's field blanket, Ranger's chest rising and falling steady as the tide. Then came the sound, the faint scrape of metal at the back latch, the whisper of a glove against wood. Damon Pike, lean frame hunched in a dark jacket, slid the lock free with practiced ease, his breath heavy with cigarettes and debt. His eyes, quick and restless, darted like dice across the table of shadows. Behind him crept Serena Lowe, her perfume sharp even in the salt night, one hand already checking the burner phone in her pocket. Last through the gap was Marjorie, her face hidden beneath a wool hood. lips painted crimson, though no one could see. She moved with the posture of someone who believed this house was still hers, anger stiffening her every step. Silas felt a tremor first, a vibration against his wrist as Ranger's collar chimed the warning. He exhaled once, then bent close to his daughters. "Lights on," he whispered, his voice calm as if naming stars. Ellie pressed her lips tight. Emma clutched Milo, now tied with a blue ribbon Silas had added as a new ritual of strength. Together they slid into the shelter of the oak desk, Ranger nudging them deeper with his nose, his body angled to shield them. Silas pressed the button beneath the desk. In an instant, the backyard blazed white, every hidden bulb flaring alive. Shadows shrieked away as though caught. Damon flinched. Serena cursed under her breath. Marjorie staggered half a step, blinking at the sudden betrayal of light. From both sides of the yard came the rush of boots. Ana Morales surged through the porch door, voice sharp as steel. "Police! Don't move!" At the same moment, Officer Ben-Yu swept in from the side, his lean frame tackling Damon before the man could pivot. The lockpicks clattered uselessly to the floor, wrists pinned behind his back with cold cuffs. Serena tried to slip into the kitchen, her hand burrowing for something in her coat pocket. She found herself staring into the eyes of Officer Kelly Tran, a young Vietnamese-American officer whose calm belied her strength. Kelly had grown up the daughter of a baker in Portland, her patience forged in early mornings of dough and fire, but her resolve hardened when she chose law enforcement after her cousin vanished to human trafficking years ago. Her voice was low and commanding now. "Drop it!" Serena's hand froze, the glint of a phone sliding to the ground before cuffs snapped tight. Marjorie, however, lunged for the half-open study window, desperation cracking her poise. But Ranger was faster. The German shepherd planted himself in her path. Hackles lifted, a growl rumbling like distant thunder. His teeth gleamed, but his eyes held steady control. He did not pounce. He blocked, holding her in place until Anna crossed the room and seized her wrists. "It's over," Anna said, voice neither cruel nor soft, only final. Above the chaos, the camera hidden in the flower pot outside had caught every frame. Marjorie's hood pulled low, Damon's clumsy hand signals, Serena's burner phone still flashing its last text. 11 o'clock. Back door. Evidence captured and sealed. Inside, Silas knelt beside Ellie and Emma, pulling them against his chest, his breath ragged only now that danger had passed. Emma held Milo tight, her new blue ribbon trembling but intact. "You did so well," Silas whispered. Ranger leaned close, pressing his head to Emma's shoulder, steadying her trembling hands. Days later, the courtroom in York County held the echo of that night. Judge Ruth Ellison, near 60, stern-eyed and silver-haired, sat with spine straight as mastwood. She had presided over family cases for decades, her gavel carrying both compassion and consequence. On the prosecution's table lay the burner phone, the lock picks, and the footage from the hidden cameras. The jury needed little more. She read the charges aloud: conspiracy to commit kidnapping for extortion, unlawful entry, child endangerment. "Guilty," she pronounced, her voice clear as bell. Sentences followed: Damon Pike, Serena Lowe, Marjorie Vance All, to serve long years in state prison. The order of permanent protection was signed in the same breath, Ellie and Emma's names written into law as shielded. Silas sat with his daughters on either side, Ranger resting by his boots, the blue ribbon still tied at Milo's neck like a banner of survival. Relief weighed heavier than fear had. As the gavel fell, Marjorie's eyes narrowed through the crowd, but the sound of chains drowned her glare. Outside, the sun fell soft across the courthouse steps. Silas unfolded a letter pressed into his hand by the clerk. Notice of a future victim impact review for parole hearings. He read the words, then looked at Ellie and Emma, their hands woven into his. He did not speak. He only squeezed, his grip a vow. Ranger shifted to his left side, pressing shoulder to thigh, a silent oath of his own. Months passed, and the Reed household found a rhythm it had never known before. The mornings were no longer frantic departures to bases or offices. Silas now rose early to make breakfast himself. Toast browned in the old iron skillet, oatmeal simmered slow, and the smell of coffee filled the kitchen while the twins, Ellie and Emma, rubbed their sleepy eyes at the table. He drove them to school in the weathered Jeep that still bore his service sticker, waving from the curb until their pink dresses disappeared into the doors. His schedule had shrunk, a deliberate cutting away of business trips and meetings, leaving behind evenings that belonged to storybooks and laughter. At night, he read aloud tales of journeys and brave creatures, his voice steady and warm. Ranger curled at the girl's feet as if he too needed the words. Healing was not left to routine alone. Every Wednesday afternoon, the twins met with Dr. May Porter, a child psychologist in her early 40s with kind eyes and a voice that never hurried. She had grown up in Bangor, daughter of a school teacher, and carried into her sessions a belief that children deserve to rebuild trust one gentle brick at a time. In her office painted seafoam green, with shelves lined by jars of colored pencils, she invited Ellie and Emma to draw what safety looked like. Ellie sketched lighthouses that never let storms win, while Emma drew Milo, her old bear, always standing at a doorway. May encouraged Silas to join sometimes, guiding him through breathing exercises alongside his daughters, reminding him that soldiers too must relearn calm. By early summer, something larger grew from their private healing. With Ana Morales' steady push and Mabel Carter's warm determination, Silas helped establish Lantern House, a community foundation dedicated to safety and support. They set it up in an unused town hall annex, the wooden floors polished by volunteers, walls bright with children's paintings. Every Thursday evening, Anna taught a class called Safe at Home Alone, teaching children what to do when doors rattled or phones rang with strange voices. Mabel baked trays of cookies for every workshop, her laughter filling the hall, her apron always dusted white. Silas himself led parenting circles for fathers who, like him, had once been absent too often. And Ranger, faithful, poised, gentle with children, became the centerpiece of Thursday afternoon, serving as a therapy dog. The twins beamed when other children stroked his fur, as if sharing their guardian made their bond even stronger. Autumn came, crisp and gold, bringing with it the school's annual art fair. In the gymnasium, strung with paper lanterns, Ellie unveiled her painting, a tall wooden door opening to a warm spill of golden light. Above it, she painted the words "Home Waits" with the light on. Judges admired the bold strokes, but more important were the tears in Mabel's eyes and the proud hand Silas laid on his daughter's shoulder. Emma, shy but resolute, chose that day to part with Milo. A new girl, Mia, had arrived in class only weeks before, her eyes shadowed by loss, her clothes too thin for the cooling weather. Emma placed Milo in her hands and whispered, "He knows the way home, but he'll stay with you until you don't feel afraid." Mia clutched the bear, her face brightening in a way that seemed to push back the dimness around her. The fair became a gathering of their Circle Mabel at the pastry booth. Anna stopping by between cases to applaud the twins. Silas shaking hands with neighbors who had once been only silent watchers. Lantern House had begun to change not only his family, but the town itself, spreading steady beams of trust where once shadows had lingered. Back at Bayview Road, Silas mounted a new wooden sign he had carved by hand. It hung in the front hall above the lantern that never went unlit. "When fear returns, we turn the light on." The words steadied him as much as they did the girls. That evening, the family sat on the porch steps, salt wind brushing their cheeks, the lighthouse beam sweeping across the bay. Ranger lay with his head on Ellie's lap, his eyes half shut but ears alert. Emma leaned into her father's side, notebook in hand. She had written a single sentence in neat child scrawl. "I am not afraid anymore. If fear comes back, I will turn on the light." Silas closed the book, pressing a kiss to her hair, and tucked it away in his pocket as though it were scripture. Just as the air settled into peace, the mail carrier arrived with an envelope bearing the seal of the Department of Corrections. Inside lay notice of an upcoming parole review hearing, a reminder that shadows never disappear entirely. Silas read the letter silently, then folded it with care. He looked at his daughters, their eyes lifted to him in quiet trust. "I will go," he said, his voice steady, "to close the doors that need closing and to open the ones that should stay open." Ranger lifted his head, pressed his nose to Silas's hand, and exhaled. It was not a growl nor a bark, only a signal as sure as any oath. Ready. And in that house on the bay, the light remained. And so, in the quiet town of Havenport, a soldier, two little girls, and a loyal German shepherd proved that even after the darkest storms, a home can choose to keep its light on. Love became their shield, trust their compass, and every day together a promise that fear would never have the last word. What about you? If you were in Silas's place, would you have the courage to put aside everything to protect your family? And if you were Ellie or Emma, would you still believe in the light ahead after so much hurt? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every word and your voices matter. If this story touched your heart, remember to like this video and follow our channel for more stories of love, hope, and second chances.